Okay, the Galactic Shaman Astrologers are meeting today about Chariklo. Some people say the name of this planet Chariklo, and I tend to call it Chariklo. Her companion in mythology is Chiron. So she is one of those long elliptical orbits that bring together the outer planets with the inner planets. So in consciousness, Chiron and Chariklo and the 22 centaurs are considered like the rainbow bridge, like the bridge that we cross between our personal consciousness and our collective consciousness. Now, Chariklo is a large centaur planet. She is possibly the largest, although they don't know exactly. She's bigger than Chiron, and her orbit is slightly longer. So Chiron is a 50-year orbit. That the Chiron return is very strong. We've talked about Chiron in different videos, but we've never really touched on Chariklo. And that, for me, is because she's kind of the yin feminine. She plays a support role. She's in the process of things with Chiron. Chiron's like this very known wounded warrior who is able to give his gifts to the world after being an outcast. But the feminine planet Chariklo is this very quiet, supportive, shape-shifting yin. And what I like about the two planets is that it is the process of relationship, in my opinion, between the masculine and the feminine. So maybe someone will get into that a little bit. Now, Chariklo has been traveling with Pluto since 2018. So that she has been so very quiet and we have not spoken about her tells me again, she's playing the receptive feminine yin and is going to help us shapeshift without demanding it. And that is a key here, because in astrology, those planets are there. They're the celestials showing you the way. You have an option of whether to shapeshift or not. Chariklo is not going to force her way on you, except that right now she's traveling with Saturn, who is the law. So what's happening in the sky right now is Saturn, who is like that firm law, that patriarchal masculine energy of you must and you will. And that like fatherly figure, who is the disciplinarian, is traveling with Chariklo right now. So there is a need to shapeshift. Pluto is like, or there will be utter destruction, and there will be. And Chariklo is the energy of, I'm going to do this because it best serves love. It's optional. You don't have to shapeshift. But with Saturn there will be karmic consequences from the Grim Reaper, Saturn, Kronos, Father Time, if we don't shapeshift. So I'm going to turn this right over to Galactic Shaman Astrologers, because some people are going to leave earlier today, and see what insights or feelings do you have about this Pluto, Chariklo, Saturn happening right now.
Okay, so I'm gonna go first, and because I'm one of those who do have to pop away, but the research I did on Chariklo was the Greek translation of her name, which is from Charis and Klo, and Charis is like charity or grace, and Klo, Klo, is like to spin or to transform, and it's also seen in the name of the fate Clotho, who is the fate of the three fates that starts spinning that thread of life, or starts creating that thread of life from what we would presume would be the basic constituents, and transforms it into the thread, which is later measured and cut. But with Chariklo, she is creating or transforming with grace, is kind of the essential translation of that name. And her most famous kind of stories is about how she is the wife of Chiron and transforms from a nymph to a centaur to support and assist him. But she's also, and it may be a different nymph of the same name, but is an attendant of the goddesses Vesta and Athena. So Athena is that creative wisdom who, one of her roles is kind of develop spinning for mankind, in weaving, in taking this, in moving and transforming something into something beautiful or useful. And then Vesta also is that humble service to others. So with Chariklo's myth of a nymph of that name, working with those goddesses is that she understands those energies intimately to be close to them. That creative intelligence and humble servitude to others. So I think that really works with that transformation with love, or shape shifting for love. So you're taking those raw materials, and I know a bit about spinning because I had sheep and we spun the wool. So you take this kind of raw, sometimes dirty, smelly wool, and you transform it into a thread, and which you can then use to make a beautiful garment or a scarf or something very warm and useful, or any other kind of fiber. And you restructure that, which is like that Saturn part coming in. So I think it's really interesting that she has been with Pluto, which is this like two signatures of a time of transformation. Pluto is transformation. Chariklo can be transformation, a soft holding space for transformation. And yet with Saturn, there is that restructuring. How do we structure that? Take something less useful and make it more useful in a new direction. And so I think it's important to look in your chart to see where it is by sign and by house. Certainly, it moves very slowly. She has an orbital path around the sun of 63 years. So one of our members of our group is just having her full return. It's like about 63 years. So my Chariklo is in Aries in the 11th house. So this place where I most transform or have that energy of transformation is in with my global community, where I can hold space with gentleness, allow people to do their inner work, is out there with my friends, my acquaintances, and even this audience is this 11th house of mine. And I also work in the medical industry, so all my patients that I work with, they are part of my 11th house. So I hold space for them to heal, to transform with that kind of gentleness and lovingness, but also with that energy of Aries, because I have an Aries Chariklo. And then if you want to do a little bit more intermediate work, you know that she is the partner of Chiron. So you look and see where your Chiron is. And my Chiron is in right over the border in Taurus. So for me, that inner relationship is, you know, my Taurus is my 12th house. And where I have that wounded is in the unconsciousness of the collective and in my own inner unconscious, in that pre-birth stuff. That's where I hold a lot of wounding. And I relate to that with working with my patients and the people out in my audience and in my global community, and that every man person. So those are things that you can look at your own chart, and how I look at Chariklo in my chart. And we have, right, for me, it's in a square position because Chariklo is currently at about 25 degrees Capricorn. It's about 25 degrees Aries in my chart. So there is a lot of like what I'm experiencing right now is challenging, and a bit of also holding space for me to transform how I interrelate with the people out there, if that makes sense. Because this experience now is at that, you know, square position to my natal birthplace that I came into as a starting point. And my current, experience is now being a bit rewritten because of my experiences out in the world with this pandemic, as we all are in different ways. that pandemic experience, how the world is changing. So I'll hold that over to Lalita for my intro. And if you don't see me again, have a great rest of the Zoom.
Thank you, Holly. You know, so many people appreciate what Holly has to say. So I said, just please get on first, Holly. Just go first, please. So yeah, many people have emailed me and loved that part that Holly adds. You can hear her mythology, which is so interesting, and her Gemini ascendant, where I mean, her curiosity isn't contagious to me. I'm listening to her going, wow, yeah, and that too. Like, wow, yeah, that too. It's a fabulous addition because everyone in the group has got like a wonderful addition. So let me just, something, you know, again, Gemini, she just surprised me of the whole spinning of raw materials into something that is very useful. This is it, folks. So get this image in your mind that we have this smelly, like often dirty piece of wool that came off of a farm animal. And you have to make that into a fine cardigan sweater. That's Chariklo. Okay, that is the shapeshift really with Pluto. It's like, it's, you know, a little bit detritus. There's some decay there. It's probably best put in the compost heap. And a lot of sheep shavings that I took off my sheep did go in the compost heap because they just were, I couldn't get them cleaned out to spin them. But when you really apply yourself, you can shapeshift this raw, dirty something into something truly beautiful. And I think when Wuhan and Mars went through, Chariklo was also there. And it was like shocking Martian, like, oh my gosh, we all have to shapeshift immediately. And Mars was very demanding about it. Now Mars is going to be making the square position, just like Holly was explaining. Mars is in Aries. So there's a crisis in action in addition to Saturn's demanding strict authority around this, that there could be some more crisis of that we really have to take what is dirty and make it into something fine and beautiful. The relationship of Chariklo and Chiron in the sky right now is also interesting because if you look at Chiron in Aries, it's, I don't even have the right to exist. I can't even do this. I don't even want to be here. I don't even want to, and wherever your Chiron is, say it's in the 7th house, I don't want to do this relationship, right? So then Chariklo is saying, yeah, but you must shapeshift. You just have to turn this terrible thing into something beautiful. And ultimately what Chariklo does is she helps Chiron get over his own woundedness, become a great teacher. And I think she holds Achilles at one point. She's a nursemaid. She actually breastfeeds a lot of these children that are brought to Chiron. And she grows them with Chiron to be these great students. So she's also like a nurse. She's feeding them and helping them grow into great warriors and medical assistants and so forth. Holly, do you want to say anything right there still?
Just one thought on the spinning part of it is that if you've ever spun any fiber or wool, being tough with it will break that thread. And there is an art and a gentleness with taking the fiber, and what you're doing is you're rotating it together, right? Like this. And it goes, I just dropped my phone. But if you hold it too hard, it will snap. And if you pull it too tight, that spinning action will wind it all up into a big mass. And so you have, one of the things that you learn with spinning, and that's why this is such a wonderful word and incorporated in this with the ancient Greek, is to spin, is that you have to hold it lightly, but with some gentle control to get it thin, to get it fine. You pull it out. sometimes you get to the part of the fiber and there's a little bit of a, what they call like a blurb or something, and you have to work through that gently, but keep the tension at the right thing to create that beautiful thread. So there is this, and because spinning is a little bit of a declined art in our culture, and not many people do it anymore. It used to be something that everybody did because that's how you had to make your clothes. But we've kind of lost that knowingness of how you hold the thread, and it was, you know, a skill that predominantly women did. So it has a lot of feminine energy behind it of, you know, sitting there and you have to treadle the little, or you have this drop spindle and you have to keep it at the right speed. And there is a lot of gentleness and dexterity and concentration and just being still and focused and drawing out that thread. That is a very different energy than going out and harvesting or hunting. That speaks to the feminine energy of Chariklo. So I hope I gave a good visual of that. It is also, you know, if you could just, there is a sensation in the hands of pulling that fiber and having it just twist together into that thread that just has a feeling on the inside that is hard for me to truly, I think, convey. But if you've experienced it, you know, and you pull it and then you create, and then you have this spool full of thread, there is very much a specific energetic feeling about it. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Hi, beautiful. Yeah. So if people can visualize that over the next month while Saturn is conjoined to Chariklo, it's a way of holding oneself, but I can also feel like the mesmerizing, like trance-like quality of that spinning. So that's there too. Who else would like to talk about the mythology or how you are actually shapeshifting, or how you see society as needing to shapeshift? Go ahead and jump in now. Just speak and unmute yourself first.
Okay. Hi. So yeah, I really see it as, with Pluto and Saturn being there, it's like we're almost being like ruthlessly told that we need to shapeshift, you know, with everything that's going on with the, you know, the Earth drama and all the Saturn structures that seem to be crumbling. It's like that she's holding that space, like Holly said. And with the spinning, I picked up on that too, and it made me think of, like, you know, the Toltec goddess of the spider weaver, and she was the one who, I can't say her Toltec name, but she was the one who spun the web of life and created that fate, and spun the weave the fate of everyone. And she who creates from the central source is a phrase that I really picked up on, and that really reminded me of Chariklo and that same spinning of grace. And it's like, even though we're going through this deep underworldly Capricorn experience with Pluto, we've got that beautiful spinner of growth to hold us steady. I told the group, but I had this really incredible dream the other night where I was a mermaid running away from something, and it was like I was about to be captured. And then it went to, after a bit of time, I was trying to protect my friend, who's a woman, from this horned man, and then I became a centaur. And I've never had a dream like that before, where I've turned into a being. And that was like, that spoke to me that was Chariklo coming through. And I don't know quite what that could mean, you know, with Capricorn, maybe as the horned man and going into that patriarchal conditioning that we are trying to restructure and escape from almost as women. That could be it. And Chariklo is there perhaps to hold space for that transformation, as well as I got that when she's with Chiron, when it's aspected really well, it's really allowing to heal that inner and outer masculine, divine masculine, because she is there just to help Chiron heal, as you said. So that came up as well, and healing that really subtly, with like delicate care, but also like a solid inner immovable strength that comes with like that quiet yin receptive energy. And that's what I got from her. And the shape-shifting aspect it's something that we all need to learn, but I think that it's actually natural for us to be able to do that, but in the society that we've constructed, we've become so set, and we've been taught to be set, from school. It's like you go into the boxes and you get into your roles, but actually we're meant to be fluid and shape-shifting and changing and adapting. And I think this is what she's here to show us, that there is going to be changes and we can shape-shift. That's that natural law that we were talking about with Capricorn, that we can do. And I think she is our guide for that. So yeah, that's what I've got so far.
Great, Bethan. That was so beautiful. And the dreams are really important because the 9th house is oracles, astrologers, seers, dream interpreters, divination, metaphysics, higher learning, so that anyone who's studying astrology also has like really profound dreams when we're on a subject. That's really important to bring those in. So that's great, because Pan is that Capricorn goat-headed fellow that Holly was talking about, the capricious Capricorn. And that's kind of the wild earth natural law, that we're more adaptable than we think we are. And I think that that's some of the structures that are breaking down right now, is that we don't really need school the way we've been doing it. We don't really need anything the way we've been doing it. In fact, let it all go and just go back to wild, capricious earth again. So yeah, go ahead, keep going, everybody. What else do you hear in this?
Hello. When you said, Bethan, about the you became a horned being, and I thought of how amazing that is. If Chariklo is shape-shifting through Capricorn, and if we're talking about some of the shadows of the stuff that we've built, then is she shape-shifting also to play out the shadow? The picture that you were posting on your wall yesterday on Facebook about you being the Fides, Lolita, and how the karma that we. So for me, I have Saturn conjunct Pluto at the moment. So my Saturn is just before my Pluto is retrograding in Capricorn. So so I have this real sense of ancestral karma because it's in my 4th house, which is your home and also the ancestry. So I feel very much like I could play out and become all the karmic shadow if I wanted to, because I can feel it in me all the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time when I'm in the house, which is a lot. What I realized when Holly was speaking about the thread is that reminded me of the threads of DNA. So if we are rewriting the threads of DNA, and for me with my chart configured to the 4th house ancestrally, I do feel like I'm threading through DNA ancestry at the moment, and with my parents particularly. I dreamt of my mum last night. And I also wonder with the square to Aries, whether I've been getting a lot of head and neck aches. I mean, since Uranus started going retrograde, actually, both Johnny, my partner, and I woke up in the morning and had an aching neck. So anyway, with Aries, I wonder with that square, you know, if we're rewiring, I can't really speak, rewiring DNA, is that affecting also the brain hemispheres? Because with the masculine, feminine, and I and a friend of mine have been experiencing quite a lot of left and right electricity blurts. So maybe my hand is shaking on the right, and my whole, like, I get like a weird kind of, maybe not literally shaking, but it feels like the energy is shaking in my body, and then it will shift between left and right. So it feels like there's a rewiring and a recalibration going on between the two hemispheres. Oh, and another thing which I've been doing is with this gentleness of rewiring. So Cancer is opposite Capricorn, and I've been holding a lot of heart space for myself and for others, and whether that's in prayer and meditation, and just being conscious of that space. And it's really gentle, which really struck me as Holly's words of the gentleness and the holding of the thread. Because if I'm holding my heart and the threads of my ancestry, I flipping need to hold them gently, because if I'm like, you gotta go, you karma, you know, it's just really bad, and it really hurts myself and that whole energy that we can all feel. Actually, I had an experience yesterday morning where I was doing that for a while in the morning and holding space for myself and what I could feel, and then I went out into town, and I felt like something really shifted to do with the fierce feminine, the Eris energy and the Lilith energy, which Mars will be going back over, right? And I really felt an empowerment in myself. And as I went into town, all of the people I was seeing, I could see in a different light. So I could see even people who looked like they were fiercely bold, as if they'd been sort of hidden before, sort of walking the street. And the way I was seeing the town was completely different. And my eyes were welling up with tears, as I could just see, I could feel the mother, and I could feel the presence of the feminine just really rising in a way that she's never been able to do. And that's just seeing that in myself, and I'm able to see it outside. Another thing I noticed is the Sun is conjunct Magdalene asteroid at 13 degrees. So I just feel that with the trine, with the Earth trine in Virgo, and Mercury on its last degree now, gathering these seeds of change and information for how to make the shape shift, it just feels like there's a sacredness of how to make the shape shift, which includes this kind of hidden genealogy, maybe this Magdalenian genealogy, or this Eris, fierce, kind of excluded genealogy that comes back into it, like the 13th number of the excluded. Yeah, so yeah, and just one other thing I noticed is that in my chart I have a Chariklo and Chiron at the beginning and at the end of Cancer. So perhaps that makes a rainbow bridge there of holding heart space for the shift in the Capricorn destabilization and restabilization. Yeah. Over to you guys.
Well, I would love to hear from Daniel too, but what I usually do is thread together what everyone else is saying. So Chariklo is conjunct my North Node. And so having Chariklo at my North Node means that I am a natural thread. I spin and I create threads between people. And if you just look at it in your own chart and how prominent is in your chart, you'll, you know, some people know me on social media. I thread together permaculture with astrology, with love between man and woman, and I thread it all. And also I'll be doing sessions for like a mother and her daughter, and the way that I read the chart for the mother depends on the mother. I shapeshift for her to what she needs to hear from an astrologer, and my tone of voice and everything. And then I'll read it for her daughter, and the mother will hear me and go, that's not how you were with me. Wait, you're not even the same astrologer. And then I'll read for the son, and he's like a total different eighth house cellarman. And I'm like, I'm right there with him. I'm in the cellar with him going to eighth house. Yeah, eighth house. And the mother's going, oh my gosh, who is this weird astrologer that I hired to do my son's chart? But that's Chariklo at my North Node. Like, I'm meant to shapeshift from one thing to the next very effortlessly. I'll be out picking beans, and then I'll come in and do a session, and that is Chariklo. And just like everyone said, it's just like, we are so adaptable. We are so capable. We are absolutely amazing. We do not need to be in boxes that no longer fit. And a virus is what shapeshifts our DNA. So the other thing that Emmeline was saying is like the threads of DNA are upgrading. Every single virus that comes to us is an upgrade to our DNA. It's like another piece in the jigsaw puzzle of how to evolve. And in this case, much of it for me is the relevance of Capricorn's like feminine earth agricultural structures, which is what Saturn represents as the god of agriculture, and the shapeshifting that is really necessary around how we grow food, and also how we distribute it. Because I think it was something like 45% of the traffic on the bridges into New York City are purely food trucks. And within 3 days, New York City would be completely out of food within 3 days if those food trucks were not transporting from very long distances. A lot of the food comes from South America. So we're like talking about like apples and potatoes from Peru landing in New York City. And I do feel like for me, that is the strongest shapeshift that I can imagine coming out of Capricorn, which is like the way we interact with feminine earth sign Capricorn. So let's hear from Daniel now. Daniel, do you have anything to say about Chariklo?
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's all going to thread together, but during the week, I suppose, when I was thinking about Chariklo, it kind of made me think of Sedna as well, and also kind of Hawaii and the pineapple, which when I think of the pineapple, I kind of think of the pineal gland. So it's like interesting that Emmeline's talking about knitting together like the left and the right. So it's kind of like how I see the pineal gland, like perhaps there's like an issue with the pineal being like a bit separated. And this week actually, or like yesterday, I got this book in the mail. Brain scientist. She's like a brainist who having a stroke, and she kind of talks through the story from like her medical perspective of what it's like, and the structures of the brain, and like her specialty is left and right brain. So it's quite interesting as well from that perspective. And she talks about how like one side kind of like really grounds you in the body and makes you very present, and the other side can kind of leave you in this sort of like cosmic sea, which is perhaps like Neptunian, Piscean kind of blissful awareness where you can't really function. And she talks about kind of knitting those two things together. And then also kind of reminded me about this story in mythology about the birth of Venus, or what's her other name? Aphrodite, who in one myth comes from the castration of Saturn, and she comes out of this sea foam. So there's kind of like seems to be like a theme there if Chariklo is like a nymph. And then there's the, what's her name? The other, Sedna, and the sea foam. So there's like an invitation to perhaps like return to that like feminine primordial waters, and that's like a place of rebirth as well. So if you can kind of like return there. And then there's also like the connection with, like you could see the Saturn story as like the wounded masculine, or like a Chiron type thing. And then something feminine is birthed out of that or is connected to that as well. So yeah, there's like a couple of different themes there as well, I suppose. Like water seems quite significant. Yeah, I don't know really, it's like a lot of different threads that are not necessarily tied together. There's perhaps like Medusa as well, or I was thinking like there's certain theories about Greek mythology. So if you go far enough back, you have a more matriarchal society with like parthenogenesis, priestesses and stuff. And then we have like a lost period where Neptune and possibly Medusa is kind of the head of the pantheon. And then you go forward a little bit and we have what we have more access to, which is, you know, Zeus and the Olympian model, which then could be interesting if we're moving into like the changeover of kind of the fall of Jupiter, and then Saturn is kind of taking their place again. So it's almost like, I guess you could say, like going backwards in time in some sense.
You're right, Daniel. That's Daniel. Now I don't know Daniel that well, but I'm starting to be like, wow. Let me unpack all that. Okay, so he's obviously got a lot of to unpack there, and I'm going to pull it with Saturn was the rapist. If you want to figure this out with Chariklo, mythologically, it was Saturn who raped Chiron's mother. Yes. Saturn came to Earth, and this is in the lost book of Enoch, which is not particularly lost anymore. But there were these interdimensional gods who found the women of Earth incredibly attractive. In the book of Enoch, it tells about these interdimensional beings came down and had their way with these women and created these monsters. So read the book of Enoch. Saturn is known as the archetypal god who came and raped the Lemurian sea nymphs. And Chiron's mother was a beautiful mermaid, and she gave Chiron up because it had been parthenogenesis before that, meaning that women were self-created and created from their light body, their mitochondria. Okay. And then when the interdimensionals intervened, it actually changed women's creativity to require the seed, which was in that article that I shared with all of you that Jeffrey Wolf Green was trying to explain, was that prior to, in the matriarchy, men had nothing to do with procreation. They did, and you had as many men as you wanted to encounter because none of them were particularly the father. It was the mother's line. But gosh, that was a lot, Daniel. What I see in the sky right now with the one who loves Chiron touching the rapist of his mother is a massive forgiveness of that. And yes, I think the pantheon is going to change because of this, because we no longer need to have this duality template of good and evil, which was our last conversation of this comet Neowise. Like, the knowledge of good and evil is complete. None of us need to be rapists. None of us need to be raped anymore. Like, it's over. We did that. We've got the complete knowledge of what it's like to be abducted, like Persephone. Everybody got the experience to be, a warmonger or a looter. And there's still a lot of fabulous looting going on for anyone who didn't quite finish that experience. Yeah, there's it's a great looting still happening if you want to get some, looting in before the age is over. But I do feel like a massive shapeshift of how we see ourselves is going to be more of we are creator gods ourselves, and we don't even need a pantheon. So when I think about Haumea, which Beth Ann posted about this week or in the chat room, Haumea is the creator goddess, and her energy, I think, was traveling with Diana, who is another form of the battle goddess Venus. Like there's a lot of, we are realizing ourselves as shape-shifting to the co-creative creator gods, and we don't need gods or messiahs outside of us anymore. There's something really profound about what Daniel also said with the Saturn-Jupiter handshake, is like, we don't need gods outside of us anymore. We don't need Zeus to be this philandering father. We are the creator gods. And we have to realize that we've created this whole 6,000-year game of the knowledge of good and evil, but we are in fact the gods. I'm just throwing that out there because that's how Daniel inspired me. He just said so much and starts spinning my, and Magdalene, if you go back to my blog last summer about Magdalene, the amygdala of the, which is a little gland just below the pineal gland, is Magdalene's waters of life, which Daniel spoke about, the waters of life, and how all these feminines somehow are connected to the sea foam and the waters of life. Magdalene was a master of how to stimulate the amygdala to release those waters into the pineal gland, that then produced a new geometry from the little crystal-like sands that sit on top of the pineal. She could create a whole new holographic reality, like Emmeline experienced when she went into town and everybody was different. That was her amygdala recreating reality all around her. So I also feel like maybe this is the opportunity to really shapeshift back into our creator God self. Whew. Okay. Who else wants to say something there?
I must say about Zeus that Johnny and I had a conversation last night about Zeus because he loves Zeus. And I was a little bit triggered about the comment because I don't really have a huge issue with Zeus. But at the moment, I was just thinking, well, Zeus is, you know, it's coming across really like all the archetypes of Zeus were coming to mind. And so I asked Johnny, how do you see a reformed Zeus? Because you love this character so much. And he was just like, yeah, I mean, I'd ask him now if he hadn't gone out, but yeah, it's basically someone who brings together everyone together and kind of creates that space, so that leadership of bringing people together so that they can be together, and then it just empowers other people through being a positive empowerer. It was essentially just empowering other people so that they can be sovereign, was kind of what he was sharing with me. So that's really cool. It's like a completely different way of seeing all of the stories. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what I'm going to do now with the whole pantheon discussion, and that all of this may shift tremendously, is I'm going to just show the picture that my friend Kelly Hunter has. And this is Chariklo, and she's a mermaid. She's a river mermaid. And this is Chiron, a centaur, who is teaching archery, so that he's an astrologer, he's a metaphysician, and he has studied from the natural world enough sciences that he's able to teach science also. And he's shooting for the stars. And then on the back, the orbit that I want to share is that Chiron and Chariklo do this inner and outer planet bridge. So the outer planets are the creator gods, like Sedna, like Haumea, like Varuna, Eris. The creator gods are these ones out here. So what Chiron and Chariklo do is they bridge our personal selves with our creator god self in the Kuiper belt. So if you study the Kuiper belt planets are all named after creator gods. So I also feel like there's something about this mythology that this shape-shifting right now is going to connect the inner self and personal self with your creator God potential. And that is that line that I was talking about, this long elliptical orbit that pulls the inner and the outer together. So I do have great hope that humanity is going to take this virus, which upgrades our DNA and is currently crashing all the old structures, and be really happy about it. Be like celebrating, oh my gosh, all of these old structures that have kept us in this other good and evil box are dissolving right now. And we're gonna step into our full potential. But what I do see humanity still doing, when I was making a joke about like, oh, well, you can still, plenty of time to loot. Keep looting, if you want to keep looting, go ahead. Is humanity's kind of having a tantrum about stepping out of that box. They still want their consumer goods and the dollar store and the way that food comes on trucks, and it's, by the time the food gets to New York, it's really actually decaying and dead, but because it's plastic coated and irradiated, you're going to eat that cucumber. I will not be eating that cucumber. But to shapeshift, I know this is my thing, but like, I also feel like each of us needs to become this creator God of our own reality in these beautiful gardens of paradise, and not want to keep eating that DNA destroyed whatever it is that came from a big monoculture crop, because your DNA just cannot shapeshift on that stuff. Now, you may be an exceptional human who can eat Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts every day and just be fully enlightened. And that is also a heck of a, like, maybe that's possible. That's amazing. But the planet herself, Gaia, is not going to survive that anymore. That's one of the things that I have to put into this conversation, is that we could, we are that supernatural. We are truly amazing that we could eat at Dunkin' Donuts every day and be enlightened. Like, it's possible. Humans are so incredible. But Gaia does not need another plastic straw or a plastic cup or another piece of packaging thrown into her atmosphere and her environment or dumped into the ocean. So I do feel like all of these structures are crumbling, like businesses are shutting down. And as I told the group, my mom used to clean condos. She's like a house cleaner in her retirement in Florida. And she used to like take all the extra unopened food from these condos where people stayed and take it to the food bank. So, there was like, she's not going to drink what they are leaving in the refrigerator. So she'd take all that and the extra toilet paper and whatever consumables to the food bank. So my mom's always been very like close to the food banks, the local food banks. And mom said, there are 5-hour and longer lines to these food banks now of people who are waiting for food. Now, as far as I know, now Florida's kind of sandy, but as far as I know, you can grow there like 9 months of the year. You could be growing tomatoes 9 months of the year in Florida, because it doesn't really snow, but maybe one little dusting. You could be growing fruit trees, and you could be growing carrots, pineapples. You could be growing anything in Florida. And one of the shapeshifts that are really necessary while these structures are shutting down and people are unemployed and they don't actually have any money to pay rent or pay for food is to shapeshift, folks. It's time to shapeshift. And the part of Saturn with this is like, you must, because you don't have food in the yard and there's none at the food bank. So the Saturnian part about this is Saturn is hardcore. I know Saturn really well. And Saturn is like, you will work harder. You must. So there's a certain amount of discipline that we need, like Holly was saying with the thread. Like, don't break the thread, but be persistent. Keep going, keep changing, keep spinning, keep transforming. Be really persistent with this thread. And if it seems like nobody's listening to you, that's just like, you know, you don't know that you're going to make this beautiful sweater. Keep spinning the thread, keep spinning it, and eventually change will happen. So if anyone wants to talk about that too, like what they see in terms of, like, planet Earth is going to make us shapeshift either through extinction, we will shapeshift, or we will, with grace, spin a new way for humanity to exist on the planet. So go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I've had quite a few thoughts from what you've all been talking about, and slightly back to the creator goddess thing. I got down here the creator of harmony and the balancer of love, and that really feels quite prominent. And then also with what's going on with the world, I mean, there's incredible shifting and changing, and last night I actually watched the film 2012. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's basically like the end of the world kind of film, and it really hit me hard, and it's like, that could actually happen, and it's, you know, that destruction is a possibility, and we have to make that really conscious. But what I've been seeing, especially where I am, is people really want to escape this restructuring. They want to escape this shift, this reality shift. And only the other day, I was speaking to my granddad, and we were talking about books, and he literally said, I read books and I do puzzles to escape reality. And it like really shocked me. For me, it's like, I love kind of being in reality and facing things and going into things, but it's like, for so many people, this is so difficult. Like, change is like, it's like so hard, you know, especially for the old generation as well. And he's really like comfortable, you know, and he's got a really good, he lives in a lovely house, and he's really structured. It's very Saturnian actually, but he still wants to escape reality. And I see it a lot with people my age, and people can't go out and party, so they've shape shifted to party in different places, and there is still that lack of respect for the fertility of the earth, that you see with, unfortunately, some people that are my generation and a little bit and younger. And that's what you brought up before, that I said with Diana, Juno and Hermea all together in the square. I translated that as fiercely protecting Earth's sacred fertility and the fertility and fruitfulness of the sacred marriage bed and the union of man and woman, the left and right hemisphere, and bringing that together, and that being there as well, I think makes a lovely, well, it's a square, so it's a pressure, but that helps, I think, with the creating harmony and balance. But yeah, we massively need to do something, and I think speaking about it like we are, and being ourselves, and that's going to be the biggest way to overcome these changing times. And it really troubles me, like, people want to escape reality, but I feel like that's perhaps what some people need to do, I guess. But it's something that I find really difficult. You can't force anyone to do things a certain way. You've got to allow, and that's, I guess, Chariklo with the spinning. It's like you've got to really gently allow it, so that the creation to unfold, but with some persistence, like you were saying, and persist and still be yourself. And then others will be attracted to that, to perhaps look into reality and what is reality, but look into what is going on and make a shape shift. But it's hard. So those are my thoughts on that. Thank
you. Hi again. I just thought I would jump in to say that something I was thinking about and forgot was this idea of as we shapeshift. I don't know how you reminded me, Bethan, but somehow something you said reminded me. As we shapeshift, how do we shapeshift? Because in this square to Saturn, because it's hard work. So because of that, perhaps that longing to want to escape from the hard work, because it's shining you in the face and you can't really escape it. So you think you can, but then you wake up the next day and then it's there again. And then you meet your mum and then it's there and it's like, hello. And what I realized is that with Mars and Aries, for me, Mars is retrograding back over my vertex. And tying this in with this spinning trance-like quality of Chariklo, which is quite magical in her creation. And I guess with Virgo as well, because Virgo does remind me of that kind of that maiden goddess mystic, really, the witch who can create. So I do feel like the change is coming, ironically, miraculously, without hard work. Although the hard work's been there over the long time, but the actual act of change just kind of miraculously comes up. For me, that's been happening with my house is shape-shifting, and that's just like I didn't go out and look for it, it just found me. But then I can see, the long-term everyday choices that I've made to empower me to be where I'm at now, and it comes from an inside place first. So I do feel very connected to this angelic quality around me at the moment, very open to that, and feel that actually that is who I am, as opposed to the external angels, but like it's me. Yeah, there you go.
I when I'm weeding my garden, I often hear Emmeline's voice say, "The brilliant lunar goddess." There was this one conversation that I had with Emmeline. It's on her YouTube about the cosmic womb and the dark night or something like that. I don't know. It was one of our private calls, and she was talking about her shape-shifting perception around the actual moon, the satellite, and whether it was like this, really horrible archonic grid thing that affects women and makes us into breeders, or is she the celestial lunar goddess? And it's amazing to me, the whole ability to shapeshift is within us. It's not a forced outside thing. It is this beautiful thing that happens within us. And I think that we surprise ourselves and go, oh, it could be this and it could be this. It could be the archonic grid and it could be the celestial lunar goddess. It could be both. I mean, and that's how I see Chariklo. It's like, she could be a centaur, or she could be a river mermaid. She could be a nurse. She could be breastfeeding children. She could be the sea nymph that supports Aphrodite and Vesta, like Holly said at the beginning. She's everything. It's not that there's nothing that she can't be. And in feminine Capricorn, she's quite capricious. She is everything. And it's easy for her to be this or to be that. It's not as hard as we think it is. And I find that same thing with growing food. You know, people have said to me, like, I don't even know, I could not plant a seed. Like, I don't know how to do that. You don't know how many people have said that to me. I'm very grateful to people who have been honest with me about this. They say, I have too much respect for farmers to even pretend that I could also farm. And I'm going, wow. But the most basic thing that a human does with earth, when I think about what humans do with earth, is we cultivate, we plant seeds. And I think that we will quite surprise ourselves how easy this is, and yet it is our biggest fear, is that we could live in a paradise garden. It is like, how could that possibly happen? That couldn't happen for me. I don't deserve it. I couldn't do it. There's no way to afford it. Only people with a lot of time can do that. Only people who are young can do that. I'm too old to do that. I mean, I have heard like everything of why I can't do that. And to me, Chariklo is that ease and grace, even if it's one little tulsi seed in a pot in your window, where you find out that that seed will shapeshift into a beautiful flower. That is Chariklo also. She's so willing to shapeshift. It's just love. It is purely just love, and suddenly she's something else. And then she will go through a process of decay and go back into the earth and be a seed again in the spring. I mean, Chariklo is that whole feminine experience of something popping out of nothing. She's just popping out of nothing, and there she is. And we as humans, that's what we are too. We came out of nothing, and now we're here, and we look like this, and we will shapeshift and go back into the void. And now I've got a spider crawling on my arm. And then we will be born again, and we'll be something amazing. And here's the spider spinning a thread right across my laptop now. And that is that spinning of creation. Like, we are the creator gods. We spin this creation. Just like the Toltec goddess who was the original spider feminine, creating all string theory and how all these planets are spinning through space and they're all connected by threads. I mean, that is what's happening. And to escape from that, or to withdraw from that, is fine too. But at some point, that undermines how amazing we are. So fully engage. If you still want to read your fiction novels at night, that's fine. But during the day, if you like to, fully engage and see how easy it is for a seed to become a flower. It's just the shape-shifting that happens naturally. And that is natural law that we're coming back to. So we're going through this process of chaos right now, potentially with chaos at the North Node. But the chaos is to bring us back to that natural law. That's what I think is happening. So that I'm all over the place spinning my tails right now, but I wonder who can pick up this thread and keep spinning.
Yeah, I had a thought. I wonder if there's like, if right now it's like a choice point, or it's like the Chariklo point of transformation, there's like a bunch of different ways that could go, right? So it sort of reminds me of like, I think we talked about it before, this like return to Eden. So like going back to the garden, and like one of the curses of Eden was you will toil the earth and it will only produce like thorns and thistles for you. So we're going kind of beyond that, like to a more primordial state where that doesn't really apply anymore. And in the Genesis mythology, that's like through a flaming sword. So it's like the transformation through fire, which could be like the chaos type stuff. But there's almost like, I think attached to that, this, some people like interpret that myth via like the Anunnaki mythology. So there's almost this idea, I think, present or presenting itself as like a choice in consciousness of you can't go back to the garden because that represents like slavery or gold mining or working for these other beings. So it's, I think, probably like a issue of like recognizing that and not choosing to go down that pathway. And then with the parthenogenesis stuff, I think like it's quite weird that we think like the earth needs us to tend her and to like put our seed or put seeds into the earth to, you know, produce this harvest. Like obviously we can do that. And I think that's quite a beautiful representation of like the earth self-limiting itself to partner with us and to give us an opportunity to like work with that process with her. But it's not absolutely necessary. Like it could be that the earth could produce by itself and we just experience the harvest. So that's kind of like perhaps the different natures of Saturn in like Capricorn and Aquarius, because I just thought of like, it says it's the god of the harvest, not, you know, that's like the end point, right? So one way to view Saturn is it could offer you this opportunity to just sort of reap the rewards without the work. And it's not that it's not with the work, it's like without the record of it's going to be really difficult and hard and, you know, you're going to die or whatever, or you're going to be in slavery. Because it's not like that, I don't think. Like, I guess you could view like Aquarian Saturn as giving you that choice not to go back to that record and to do it in a different way, which is cosmic, but still quite natural at the same time.
Yeah, I think that Pluto and Saturn is like the undoing of the monoculture farming that has kind of raped the earth. The way I see that is that I produce way too much food, particularly this year because we moved some more compost around. But I actually produce so much food that most of it goes into the compost. I actually produce way too much food because when it's done in a permaculture way, and each year we expand a little bit more, it's like I just walk out there and there's just tons of food. Like I've run out of mason jars again. Like I don't even know where to put all of this food. It is so abundant. And my mom, you know, I really reflect on my mom because I have a moon in Capricorn and all these planets are in Capricorn. So I was asking my mom, she has become so like alert to the fact that there is like starvation in Florida. And as we said in the last video, there was starvation in Beirut such that people were committing suicide. There is starvation on the planet when really it is totally the easiest thing to have food. So my mom was like, yeah, you just like, I don't go to the store but once a week, and that's for some, you know, coffee and some things like that. But this year our harvest is just crazy easy. Like there's nothing to it. But when you look at the huge farm machinery, like massive $300,000 combines and the agrochemicals and everything of like the toiling of what Daniel was just saying, that has been going on for quite some time, masses of fields of grains and so forth since Sumerian times. But are we enslaved to it anymore? No, we're not enslaved to it anymore. Now we really all can live in the Garden of Eden. And it's just a matter of are people even willing to eat vegetables? Like, I was going to put these 4 massive zucchinis that Claude was like, Lalita, you overlooked these zucchinis, and now they're like, you know, I'm like trying to carry them up today. And I was going to put them by the side of the road. I don't think anyone will take them because I've done it before. People just don't know even like, and if you take them to the food bank, they'll just refuse them. You cannot take zucchini to the food bank because people don't know how to cook it and it just rots in the shelves. So there's a shift right now about like how abundant the earth is. And a lot of people don't really know, because I was the farm to school coordinator, that food comes from the earth. Did you know that? Like, children don't know. Did you know that? That children do not know that a carrot grows in the dirt. They don't know, even in Vermont. And a lot of adults don't too. They don't know how celery grows. They have no idea where a beet comes from. We're losing some of this based possibly on a trauma of slavery, like Daniel was saying, from an Anunnaki intervention into our agriculture back during the 6,800 year period. There was an intervention there where the DNA was changed through agriculture, and also livestock, you know, sprang up out of nowhere. And as far as I know, pigs are actually human DNA chimeras. So they are human crossed with a wild thing from the forest, so that when you eat a pig, you're eating human DNA. So there is some trauma around agriculture, and forgiving Saturn right now with Chariklo contacting him with grace is like, that hardcore Saturn influence has got to be forgiven, and we now need to come into a more Aquarian Saturn where, you know, the Aquarian starry photonic light just comes down and makes that fabulous piece of food that upgrades your DNA, instead of it being this toil, this horror, this heavy equipment, this disconnectedness with the land. Yeah, I would suggest that with Chariklo only going to be with Saturn this month, and then Saturn's going to go direct and move away from Chariklo, we will never see this opportunity again. At least I won't. So I did mention this to this group. I think that's what Daniel was kind of saying, is like there's a choice point right now. We will never, any of us, ever see Pluto, Chariklo, and Saturn like this again. And for thousands, I didn't do that. I'm not great with orbits and mathematics, but possibly for thousands of years, we will not see the Pluto, Chariklo, Saturn at the last degrees of Capricorn again. I mean, this could be an incredibly rare shape-shifting event that we are allowed to do right now. It's a choice point. And because Chariklo is a 63-year orbit, I also feel like there's a level of maturity. Like, are we grown up now as humans? Are we grown up? Or are we still infantile and in need of a dependency matrix and a messiah coming to save us? Or are we grown up now? Because Chariklo is like the crone, right? She's a 63-year orbit. She's a grown-up feminine. So she's not like Persephone, who gets abducted by Pluto and she's a little girl and she doesn't know what's going on and she wants to actually get abducted by the Dark Lord, but then she's down in the underworld. I feel like Chariklo is like, now we're grown up enough. We've matured. 63 years old is when you're ready to come into a more spiritual life and maybe even retire from that hard labor, that hard work. You know, that terrible toil that only grows prickers, thorns. Maybe she's the grown-up feminine that we're all stepping into now. Let's see what people have to say about that.
I'd just like to say that there's so much grace on learning to grow. You know, I felt a bit, what's the word, helpless, having no soil when we went into lockdown. But I just thought, you know, what do I have? And I just got some pots and some compost, and it was kind of ridiculous buying compost, but I just had to do what I had to do, and planted in these pots. And I just believed in faith that somehow these will shapeshift to work in the pots. They're not going to be giant, they're going to be like fairy size. Everything's going to be miniature, but that's kind of cute, and that's what I've got for now. And I'm not going to die because I can still go to the shop, so it's like a compromise. And I really just had to hold that grace for myself, that I can't do it all now, but it's a process. And we harvested our potatoes, and we grew them in these like pots. They're not very big. You know, you're meant to probably grow them in giant bins if you don't have soil, but we didn't have them, so we just did them in plant pots. And some of them were sticking out the top, so some of them we won't eat, but most of them were underneath. And they're like quite big, and they're beautiful and amazing. And we grew them from a potato that was eyeing from the organic veg box company. So we didn't even get the seeds, we just used it. I didn't get seeds. I don't even know if you can get potato seeds, but we grew it from a, I don't even know that much, but we grew them, and it makes like, we have 3 pots, and they probably each make one meal for both of us shared. So it's not a lot, but it's just an amazing opportunity to see that we can do it. And the onions, and everything looks kind of weird, and you can eat it in different ways than what I thought. Like, you can eat the leaves on a celery plant, which is mostly what I do, because the celery hasn't really grown properly because the pot's too small, but the leaves are still really nutritious. The tomatoes aren't going to go red, but you can eat them green and then save the seeds, possibly. So it's kind of a weird way of eating, but you can still eat. So there's that grace to that transition point that I just wanted to share, that it's not, doesn't need to look perfect.
Well, there's one more thing that I'd like to mention that has come up in my sessions with a woman who was very identified with Hawaii. Okay, so, and I'm trying to figure out, she will clearly know that it's her. And she's so wonderful and supportive. But what we realized together, and she has a big stellium in the 8th house, so she's like, you know, she can go to these like taboo places with me. She realized that the mother wound of the chimera, which is, Chiron was a chimera, okay? He was part interdimensional god, he was part horse, and he was part sea nymph. The chimera are the Anunnaki hybrids, and they actually allegedly are the blue blood of what's called the Cabal. Okay, so now I'm going to get into like the whole conspiracy theory thing just very quickly, so you can see what I also think Chariklo and Saturn are doing. Now, what happened was that the women of Earth were beautiful. They were sea nymphs or other light-bodied incarnation of the feminine that produced from their own mitochondria. And when the interdimensionals came, they created different hybrid races. Some of them were monstrous, some of them were giants, some of them were centaurs. These things all actually existed. And there have been skeletal records of giants and centaurs and different creatures like that. But there was one group that became kind of the blue bloods that consider themselves the elites, that were the Cabal. Now, the Chimera group is actually interdimensional God crossed with the women of Earth, and they are the Cabal. And what I came to with this client was that the people who are, particularly there are a few women speakers right now who are very like against the Cabal. They want the defeat of the Cabal. and that somehow the defeat of the cabal will allow us to evolve, which in my last, I kind of said, the defeat of the cabal has nothing to do with our evolution. In fact, that is the ultimate mother wound, is that we, many of us, are the mothers of that chimera group. We were the sea nymphs. We are the mothers of the cabal. And the more that we hate them, the more that we deny them and outcast them like Chiron, the deeper the wound. The more that we say we have to defeat them to evolve, that is our own child. Like, how could defeating my child possibly lead to my evolution? So the other shapeshift I think humanity needs to do right now is to let go of the persecution of the, quote, elites. Because as long as you are focused on that, you are not within your own authentic authority, and letting those people, whatever their world is, create your own world. You don't have to defeat them to create your own paradise. Create your paradise. So I do feel like the Pluto, Chariklo, Saturn thing is like the forgiveness from those original rapes, and that the womb is finally free of feeling like we threw away our chimera children. One of the wounded, most deeply hurt part of the feminine is, like we talked about in the video I did with Emmeline, is that my womb has been the source of suffering instead of the source of beauty and procreation. And we just must let that go. And then I think we'll all be very free to plant any seed we like without fear. Anybody want to jump in that one? Hopefully that will resonate out in the psyche right now, because there is a lot of chaos that is occurring around this idea that we somehow have to defeat some part of humanity instead of just go and be your own sovereign creative intelligence. I think that that is long overdue, and part of Chariklo's grace to embrace Saturn.
The story of Kuan Yin comes to mind, because she is the goddess who took the karma of her father and then gave her eyes and her own limbs so that he could live. He's like an old man as well. He was going to die. He was going to die, so he's an old man. But she still gave anonymously her organs for her father. And then when he when he found who she was, and she was in a cave, blind, and she had given her, it was just pure love. She was floating on a cloud, as it were, of pure love, even though she had nothing, sitting cross-legged in a cave. And then he, for all the torture that he had created for her, just fell to his knees and was just weeping, forgive me. And she's like, of course. And then she transforms into this incredible 100-handed woman who's sort of flying in the sky kind of thing. And that just really, that the satisfaction of compassion for me is so much greater than alienation. Like, to hold that person in your bosom is like the most beautiful thing I could think of. Is to hold them close. So I really hold that story of Kuan Yin closely to my heart. Yeah.
Okay, I think that pretty much sums up the energy of Chariklo, that she is willing to shapeshift to best serve love, and that Chiron is that archetypal chimera group centaur who has been outcast by society. And she shapeshifts to love him and help him serve all of humanity. And so that is the energy that we are capable of taking hold of from the celestial objects right now, and just allow this graceful transmission to feel into your body, and it will shapeshift for you. So I'm going to say goodbye to you all, and thank you to everyone who's listening and taking this to your heart. Bye-bye.